It's a huge scene for electronic music in South America. And
Yeah.
the DJ that I represent, Umek, who's one of the biggest techno DJs around, the best gigs he had was in South America because they were all sold out and people were just crazy. There was a really good venue in Argentina. I think it's called the Crowbar. It was always sold out, so it has a capacity of, I would say, 2,000 people. It's just a crazy club. So it cannot compare with the scene in Northern America. In the US, they have huge mega festivals, but Latin Americans have a much higher temper, so it's much more energy.
Gente, bienvenidos todos a un nuevo capítulo. Hoy día les traigo 3 buenas noticias. La primera es que tuvimos un capitulazo con un entrevistado de lujo. La segunda es que con Jorge decidimos echar a Luis y a Eric de esta sección porque no aportan nada. Y la tercera es que ya dentro del capítulo nos enteramos que el reggaetón va para arriba, muchachos.
Buena. Sabemos que les gusta eso.
Así que nada, Jorge, ¿qué más?
Bueno, la data también, o sea, nos cuenta sobre la data y la importancia que tiene y el rol que tiene en Viberate, en cómo ellos tienen la mejor data y cómo la hacen ver sexy para los artistas.
Otra cosa es que dio consejos muy buenos para emprendedores. ¿Cuáles son las cualidades que los inversionistas buscan en ti para invertir? ¿Y cuáles son las claves que ellos se fijan a la hora de hacerlo? Lo dice Vasja, lo dicen muchos emprendedores exitosos. Muchas veces los inversores invierten más en ti que en tu idea. Así que da consejos claves en esa área.
Finalmente tuvimos buenos consejos para artistas emergentes en este mercado que todos sabemos que está completamente saturado. Entonces, citándolo textualmente, dice que hoy en día cualquiera puede correr una campaña de ads por 10 o por $20 y ya tienes una competencia gigantesca. Entonces nos cuenta cómo podemos lidiar con esto.
Bueno, nada, esta es una entrevista con un gigante, entre comillas, dormido, o no tan dormido ya de hecho, pero que sin duda está estar jugando un rol muy importante en los próximos años. Y queremos aprovechar sin duda para agradecerle nuevamente por haber estado con nosotros. Lo pasamos increíble, lo disfrutamos y aprendimos un montón. Muchas gracias y que lo disfruten.
How are you, Vasja?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
We're great, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
We know that you have already answered this question before in Pat Podcast, but for the sake of our audience to get to know you, give us a little and brief introduction about how you started in the music industry and tell us which is your favorite artist, album, song. I mean, we know it's Umek, but which one will be your second favorite?
Okay, so yeah, I've been in the music business basically since I started working. So as soon as I finished my studies, I got my first employment in an event management agency. And then we kind of evolved into a music management agency because one of the partners is Umek, one of the best techno DJs in the world. And back then he was without management and he said, okay, you guys are really good in marketing and music management is basically marketing. With a slight twist. So why don't you guys just learn music management and manage me? And that's how we started working together. And then we were full on in music management for a couple of years. And then we were investing a lot of money into advertising his career. So at one moment, we were investing about 120,000 euros per year into Facebook advertising, which is a lot of money. And it was no way for us to figure out how those investments are resonating in his popularity. So whether it means that if we invest money, his popularity is going to go up or down, or fans are going to buy more tickets. It takes time for you to figure this out. And during that time, you spend a lot of money again. And that's why we said, let's set up a website that's going to measure online popularity for DJs. And it was just a simple MVP. So we set up a service that was counting followers. So how many followers you had on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. Back then it was still MySpace. So it was ages ago, and Google+. And we set it up with 1,000 DJs that we knew and we entered manually. And then we opened up the database and it just grew to 30,000 user-generated profiles. It was back then. It was still exclusively an electronic music service, and then we said, okay, we got 30,000 user-generated profiles. That means that people like what we do. And we said, okay, now let's turn this into real business. So we renamed the service from, back then it was Top DJs, into Viberate. The extra E in the middle, it's Viberate, is because we were rating the vibe. And the domain was much cheaper. And we raised our first angel round, $1 million, which allowed us to produce an MVP that wasn't only focusing on electronic music, it was focusing on all genres. With that MVP, we went straight to Silicon Valley. So my wife and I, we packed our bags and we moved to San Jose for 4 months, pitching investors, and we crashed and burned because we were way too early for Silicon Valley. We only had an MVP, the first version, no revenue, very little users. A nice idea won't bring you an investment from the value investors. But it was a nice experience. We learned a lot. We were pitching investors just unannounced. We rented a car. We got a list of about 70 VC companies that were known to invest in music companies. We're just driving in the Bay Area and just crashing offices unannounced. Hey, we came here for a pitch. Were you announced? No, we just came here. And they were really excited, and they said they really liked the hustle. Because you have to go out of the comfort zone to just crash into someone's offices and say, okay, we're Viberate, can we pitch you? So it was a nice experience. We learned a lot. We got a nice network, but in the end, we didn't raise a round. Then we came back to Slovenia, almost went bankrupt, got bailed out by one of the investors, and then we did an ICO because it was 2017, the hype of the ICO, the entire scene. And we managed to raise $10.7 million in under 5 minutes. We sold out immediately. We could easily raise 50 million, but it was just, we didn't need that much money. So now we have a token. It's trading on on most of the major exchanges. And it allowed us to build a database further. So now we have 500,000 artist profiles, 160,000 venues. We used to have 500,000 events at any given moment back when events were still allowed. So hopefully this is coming back. 5,000 festivals, 50,000 labels. So right now the easiest way to explain what we are is, and we're doing for music what IMDb is doing for the movies. We're getting the entire ecosystem consolidated in one platform. We analyze about 1 billion data points at any given moment. We rank artists, festivals, venues according to those metrics. So it was more than one question and one answer, right?
You forgot the part of your favorite album and your
the tour.
yeah.
So that's a weird thing because it took me a long time to get comfortable with electronic music, because my favorite band of all time is Metallica. I went to their concert in Italy, and it was the best concert in my entire life, and I don't think there's ever going to be a better concert. So if I stop going to concerts, I'm going to be okay. I saw them once, and that was ticked off my bucket list. I still love them, but obviously working in electronic music for such a long period of time, it gets under your skin. So apart from Umek, obviously he's a great producer, and he produces amazing techno tracks. They really drive you. But this is a music that you listen to when you go to the club, because it really has a power and a drive. But when I'm at home, or when I'm on my vacation hanging out with friends, I like a more deep house or kind of toned down music, chill out. I'm a huge fan of Clapton. They just have amazing music. So I listen to those podcasts when I'm cooking. So when I try to chill out.
Yeah, and when I see people like you that is disrupting the music industry, I always wonder how they were when they were my age, when they were in the university. So what did you do to create this entrepreneurial attitude when you were in your 20s? And what prompted you to establish like this first management company that you had?
So I think that there are two kinds of people. You have people who have an entrepreneurial spirit, so they don't want to work for a big corporation, just being one of the many employed in a corporation. And there are people who want to do that. So I would say it's a question of responsibility. So if you have your own company, you have huge responsibility, huge pressure. You have to deliver. You have to pay your salaries each month because your employees expect that from you. So it's a huge pressure. And sometimes some people, a lot of people, I would say most of people, don't want that pressure. So they're most comfortable just doing a regular 9 to 5 job in a corporation, getting their paycheck each month, going home and completely forgetting about their day at work, which is nice. It sounds, the older you get, the better it sounds, but it's still, I still don't picture myself that way. And maybe the part of why I became like that was also that I was studying business since I left elementary school. So my high school was business, my university studies was business, my after graduation, my master's was also in marketing. So there was no way for me to do any other job. I first applied for the job in the management in the event management agency, and that was it. That was my only job application. And then I got, as I worked my internship there, I soon got promoted into full partner, and so now I'm one of the co-owners of the company.
Yeah, and like with all your experience, you've developed and worked in different fields in the music industry. And talking a little bit more about the management side, you already mentioned how you started working with Umek, but how was it to build this relationship that made you literally co-found Viberate with him? What aspects were you like key for you to develop this nice professional relationship in a way that it ended up being an opportunity for you both to open new fields in the music industry?
So he was a partner from the beginning in the event management company. He invested in the company. He wasn't actively managing it because he still as a full-time DJ. And this is how I got to know him, And then I slowly took over his management. It was a natural thing because we were working together. We trusted each other. Trust is a crucial factor when you work with an artist, and then we just learn as we go. So at first we didn't have a clue about management. So you have to read books, you have to hang out with people, you do a bunch of crazy stupid mistakes. We did a lot of conferences, so I traveled to most of the electronic music conferences across the world, and this is where you get to know people, build a network, and get to learn the trade. And Umek was also learning together with us. So it was the first time that he actually got a management, because before that he was just his own manager. But you cannot do this for a long time if you're a huge artist. And he used to have up to 120 gigs per year. So there was no time for him to do the management stuff. And artists shouldn't do the boring desk job, because they need to be in the studio, they need to be creative, and all the taxes and travel logistics and marketing, it just kills the creativity. So it was the right decision for him to decide to employ a manager.
So Vasja, you began Viberate because you couldn't find enough information when you were conducting campaigns and spending so much money on digital marketing. Do you still conduct ad campaigns? And if so, what is the best way to go about it?
So yeah, we started Viberate to solve our own pains. That's usually the best way to start a startup, because you see that there's no service that's solving your problems, and if you start a service to first solve your own problems, then it's usually you do a good job because you're motivated. And yeah, we still do a lot of work in marketing, but it's getting more and more hard. It's a hard job. So before social media, you just had to have a budget and target the right media. magazines, you went to conferences, you were keynote speakers. So this is how you got out to the public. But now when social media completely took over the entire digital marketing scene, it's really hard to stick out, because anyone with 20 euros can start an ad campaign on Facebook, and if they just have to target the right audience, and they're going to appear bigger. And so now all of a sudden you have a bunch of competition that didn't stand a chance back 15 years ago or even 10 years ago. So you have to do a much better job than others are doing. But with Viberate, this is also one of the things that we want to solve is, if you do a good job as an artist, if you take good care of your online appearance, if you invest in your fan base, if you engage with them, if you make sure that your stuff is going to get picked up by the fans, you're going to get higher up a rank, and then you're going to get the attention that you deserve. So you don't need to have huge budgets if you're really talented. It helps, sure, it helps. So there's superstars that are always going to be on top of our ranks, but we try to offer people a good discovery service. So if you don't have a budget to book Metallica, by the way, I just saw the picture on your wall. That's Master of Puppets, right?
Yeah, the best album.
Yeah, and yeah, so if you don't have a budget to book Metallica for a concert, you can still go on Viberate. You can filter out metal bands that are getting traction right now. They're not well known, but they are putting good stuff online. See if they're available, and you can book them. And they would be impossible to discover in any other way, because there are thousands of them. But we do have all those bands in our database. We measure their popularity, so it's easy for them to be discovered and for promoters to discover them just by using Viberate.
And to have like a little bit more of an overview of the music business before we dive into data, right now DSPs are the ones who threw the life jackets and saved the music industry because it was drowning in the peer-to-peer revolution, right? Labels and everyone else had to align to their goals, and as a result, DSPs establish the rules of the game. That's why labels pitch music to Apple, Spotify, or other streaming services on a weekly basis, and it's insane how much effort artists have to put in to ensure the DSPs that they will generate enough traffic and audience to their platforms. So as a manager and an entrepreneur and someone who oversees data on a daily basis, what do you think the future holds for the relationship between labels, DSPs, artists, social media, and audiences?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's a tough one. The current model of distributing music to fans is broken, because fans obviously aren't gonna pay more than $10 per month to get access to the entire global catalog of music, which is something that you get with Apple Music or Spotify. So you get like 90% of all music in your phone or in your car. So that's the top price that they're willing to pay. But at the other hand, it doesn't generate enough money for producers to live just by producing music. So the majority of the money goes to the top superstars who are already rich, and it's so much harder for the smaller artists to earn enough money to quit their day job. So this is a problem that no one knows how to solve. And yet Spotify was not profitable until last year. So it's an additional argument why the model is broken. So for us, we think that the solution here is in live events. So most of the artists, including Umek, they still earn the majority of their revenue by doing live events. And this was so much more visible now during the pandemic, when live events suddenly got away and people were just left with nothing. So artists who were making good money by doing live events were now forced to find another job, which didn't have to do anything with music. They could might as well go work for McDonald's, because they just couldn't earn enough money from DSPs, from collective societies to pay the bills. So it's I I'm I don't have an answer of how this entire music industry, this entire recorded segment of the industry is going to evolve in the next couple of years, but it's not very promising to be honest.
I want to add that I completely agree with what you say, Vasja. Like, actually, we had another guest here that had friends of the music industry that, just as you say, are having now side jobs like as delivery. So it's crazy. No, I guess no one has the answer. But I want to take you back to Viberate, because we found this whole concept amazing. Viberate is not only a data platform, you're aiming to create this huge marketplace. And we found that fascinating. And especially now that you're talking about that the live industry is maybe kind of a solution, partially, but it definitely plays a huge role with the NFT now that you did with Umek. So I would like you to tell us a little bit more about Viberate, how this concept came to be, especially for our audience that doesn't know it very well, but we know it. You have a lot of features that are unique, that are amazing for this music industry.
So our plan is quite simple. So first, we set up a platform that's gonna consolidate the entire music industry, the professional side of the music industry. So artists, agents, managers, labels, promoters, venues, festivals. So they each get their own profile, their own Viberate page. And then we measure data that we get from streaming services, from social media, from ticket providers. And then our algorithms figure out who's the most popular in their genre, in the subgenre, in the country, or the combination of them all. So you can create all kinds of different charts. If you want to know who's the best rapper in Mongolia, you actually can find this out on Viberate. So this is the second part. So the first part was consolidate everyone. And then the second part is find a way to tell them apart. So find a way to measure who's more popular than who. That makes it easier for professionals to discover new talent. And then the third part is allow them to do business with one another. So create a marketplace. We're not quite there yet with the marketplace feature. So we have the database, we have the analytics features mostly done. And the marketplace is the only artist that you can currently book through Viberate is Umek. So he's the only one who has a booking button on his profile. So if you click there, you enter a venue, it's going to connect with our venue database. So you can just select the venue from the drop down. You select the date, and then you type in your offer, and then I'm going to get the offer, and I'm going to contact you and finish the booking. This is an MVP, so a minimum viable product right now. We're just testing it. And if it goes well, we're going to allow first for beta testers to install the book button and then just see how it goes. And if it picks up, we're just going to do a similar thing that Airbnb did for accommodation. So we're going to become an online place where you can go to search for artists, to filter out who you're interested in, and then use analytics to find out who's the best from the group that you picked, and then just finish the booking simply without leaving Viberate.
That's amazing. And as a result, Viberate contains data that enables every stakeholder in the music industry to make better decisions, such as booking agents, record labels, A&Rs, and managers benefit from this service. And every piece of data is maybe linked to the Viberate charts. Can you tell us what are Viberate charts and how do they work in relationship with the artist network?
So yeah, we analyze about 1 billion data points each day that we get from social media, streaming sites, and ticket providers. We work with most of the major ticket providers who feed us daily feeds of events. And then our engine can recognize the names that are on the lineup. It can recognize the venues, and then it matches everything with our database, so we know who's playing where and with whom. and then we analyze how their content is picked up by the fans, so how many likes they get on different channels on Instagram, how many plays on YouTube and SoundCloud and Spotify. So we try to analyze any kind of engagement, any kind of popularity metric that we get, and then we mix all this together in one basket and present it as a Viberate score. And this is our own popularity metric, and you can use it to rank artists according to their popularity. So you can look at the global chart where we list all artists ranked by Viberate popularity, or you can filter by genre, by subgenre, by country. Like I said, if you want to know who's the best rock band in Colombia, you just select Colombia rock, alternative rock, and you're going to get a chart. So this data is then used by labels to check who's trending in each country, to sign them before Sony does. Or if you already have an artist roster, and if you want to know where your artists are popular, we can even survey data that shows you where the fans are coming from based on the data that we get from streaming providers. So if you want to know how many people listen to Madonna from England, we will survey that data, which is a nice information to have if you manage an artist. And if an artist has a new release or a new album, you have to advertise it. And it will cost millions to advertise it globally in every country in the world. But you can go to Viberate and see in which countries or even in which cities this artist is popular, and then just focus on those countries and cities, which is going to save a lot of money. And the same goes for promoters. So if you want to book an artist, it doesn't matter who you like. It matters who people from your city like. And you can go to Viberate and you can check if you do an event in Los Angeles, just see if this artist that you're interested in is actually popular in Los Angeles. And if you see that they're getting tens of thousands of plays on Spotify, then those people are probably going to buy a ticket to see that artist live.
Yeah, like I feel that data is really important, and we have actually talked a lot about it on this podcast. And it's really interesting how you told us that you have basically billion data points where you got all this information. And we always say that that's not the most important thing, but knowing what to do with the data that you are provided with. So in your position as co-founder of Viberate and manager, which analytics would you consider are the most important for an artist, for them to know which direction to move forward in their careers?
So it depends what's your goal. So if your goal is to sign an artist to your label that's going to sell a lot of tracks, you can use, if you work in electronic music, you can use our Beatport analytics, because there we are measuring the ratio between released tracks and charted tracks. So if the track is charted on any of the charts, it's going to sell like crazy. If it's not charted, no one's going to buy it. And we have that data for 7 years, so 7-year history. And you can see if a certain artist has 80% of the released tracks also on charts, there's a good chance that the track he's going to release with your label is going to get charted, so the label is going to sell a lot of tracks. So this is how you use it if you're an A&R. And if you're an artist or an artist manager, you can track how different factors like tours, album releases, investments into advertising, how they influence your artist's popularity. So if the artist engagement goes up after you invested €1,000 into Facebook advertising, or if the artist got new followers across different channels when they went on tour, if you had a tour in Latin America, you can check if his popularity in Latin America went up because of that. So there are different, it depends on your role and on what you're looking for. But yeah, you have to look at processed data to get that information. Just looking into numbers straight on social media, it's not going to take you anywhere, because you have to have data for the entire community to know how to compare the numbers. And just working with raw data is not the easiest thing in the world. So we have a bunch of servers, and they cost a lot of money to operate, to process those numbers. So you're rarely going to see raw data on Viberate. We try to process everything in a way that people can understand and know how to use to make better informed decisions.
Vasja, just a quick follow-up, because we all agree that data is super important and it's super important to know what to do with it. But Viberate has the cleanest data on the market. And one of those reasons is that you have you eliminated these double entries that other competitors might have, that you have 2 pages for the same artist, which make really hard to download or even analyze data in the most optimal way. So could you explain to us a little bit, how do you get the cleanest data? Because as data nerds and everyone out there that needs data to work, which, by the way, it's key. Every label is doing it for people that are hearing us. Could you explain us, how do you get this clean data? And also, like, a practical question would be, if someone downloads a spreadsheet from Viberate, let's suppose for the month May for X artist, how would that spreadsheet or data entries would be different from any of your competitors for the same period of time and the same artist?
So having a cleanest data set is the number one ingredient and the most important ingredient if you want to have a data analytics service. And the only way to do this in the music industry is by hand. It sounds awful, but it is what it is. And this is why we released our own crypto token, because we used it to reward fans who were helping us building the database, because you need a human touch. So it's impossible for a machine to put together a database of all musicians in the world and just keep it clean, because you're going to have 5 different profiles for Jay-Z. So how get Jay-Z written together, Jay-Z written with a space, with a hyphen, with whatever the version is. And it's going to be impossible to do any kind of analytics, because you need to have one profile and all the data points point you to that profile in order to calculate any kind of metrics. So we used our token to reward fans who are adding new profiles. So you could go to Viberate, check for your neighbor's rock band. You didn't find them in a database, you added them, and then you got our token in return, which you can later sell on the exchange and just pay for your bills. And this is what makes us different from other services. So a lot of services are going to claim that they have 1.5 or even 2 million artists in our database, which sounds like a lot, but we have less than 500,000. We have about 480,000 artists. But I bet that you're going to find every artist that you like in our database. So in terms of unique hits, I would say that we're all the same, but we only have unique profiles. What was the other question regarding the data?
Yeah, if you would download the supposed
the spreadsheet. Yeah. So right now we don't have a feature that is going to allow you to do any kind of data exports. We do offer this custom to larger clients. So you can, if let's say if Universal wants an export of the best performing US artists in punk rock, they can ask us for it, and we're going to export whatever data they would request. So it depends. It's not a standard service, but it depends what you like. So maybe they're interested in how their tracks got charted on Spotify, or maybe they want to see the distribution of fans across different channels, or the engagement versus the database, the follower growth ratio. So we can do any kind of exports of any kind of data combination, but we don't have a standard service for that.
Nice. Yeah. And I also I have already used Viberate, and it's quite useful also just because of the insights that you can get right away that in other services that you cannot get. For instance, like the comparison of followers growth with engagement. Instances like that are instantly catchy to the eye because you can see how actually the artist is performing.
Yeah, it might look like a very straightforward and simple metric, but it took us a couple of years to just nail it. Because the biggest challenge here was no one likes stats. No one likes statistics and math. except for my co-founder and CEO Matej, who's crazy about stats. But I hated statistics and my studies, and I was just the happiest man in the world when I finished the exam. And I said, I never want to deal with those numbers again, and yet here we are. So that was a huge challenge because people generally don't like to look at stats, and especially people who work in music, they hate math. And it's a really traditional service. When you look at the professional segment, people still use almost fax machines. They're going to use Excel spreadsheets is the peak of technology that most people in music are going to use. But this is changing now. We're happy to see the change now, and people are starting to realize that data is key, and that working with data doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be really good in statistics or that you have to love math. And I'm an example of that. I like to look at information if they're presented in a nice way. So we invest a lot of effort into employing UX designers that know how to work with numbers in order to make people more comfortable working with it. Yeah, to make them sexy. That's the best description that
I agree. I agree 100%. I agree 100%. For instance, you also stated once in an interview that Viberate is not a music business company, it's a data company that happens to work in the music business. And also you remarked that in order for your company to scale, you need to have a broad understanding of the new industry you are getting into. However, as gaming becomes more popular, it is increasingly overlapping with music. Do you see Viberate at some point collecting data on gamers in order to facilitate collaboration with artists?
I wouldn't bet on that. As you said, we collect data much like any other company. IMDb collects a lot of data, but they have the domain knowledge and they know how to process that data to make it useful for movie industry stakeholders. But we have experience in music industry. We know how the music industry works, what's important from any aspect. So we used to work as promoters, as a label, as artist managers, as talent bookers. So we have experience in all fields, and we know what matters to those people. And this is why I said that we're a data company that just happens to work in music. We happen to work in music because we know the music industry. We don't know anything about gamers. We don't know how to tell them apart, how to know who's better than who. And there would be no way we can get a data set, but we wouldn't know what to do with the numbers. And this is really important. If you wanna offer a good quality service, then you can be the best mathematician in the world. If you don't know what the industry is looking for, it doesn't help you. You're not going to be able to create a really great service.
Vasja, and talking about trends, I want to go a little bit maybe away, but I want to ask you what's your opinion on reggaeton. Actually, we know no one has the answer for sure, but do you think it's on the top of the way? It's gonna go still up? It's going now down? As I said, we know no one has the answer, but what would be if you had to take a guess, what would it be about this genre that we all love as Latins?
Well, if I would have to take a professional guess, I would say that it's still one of the most popular subgenres in the world. So we have it under Latin. It's one of the subgenres in Latin. It's by far the most popular. I was just checking the reports that we did on genres a couple of weeks ago. So we had a design report that had a world map, and it was colored. The countries were colored based on the genre that they have, that's the most popular, and where popular bands are coming from. So the only thing that we had to magnify was Puerto Rico, because it was extremely strong in terms of reggaeton, and it produced a lot of global superstars. But it's such a tiny country that when we try to put it on an A4 sheet of paper, it would be invisible, and it would look like they're not important, but they are as important as, I don't know, the Netherlands or Germany, because they have such a huge concentration of superstars that produce music that apparently all of the people in the world except for me like. Personally, I don't like reggaeton. Yeah, but I think that they're doing a great job. So in terms of commercial exploitation, they're making a lot of money. But in terms of artistic value, I don't think that a reggaeton artist is ever going to be compared to Freddie Mercury performing Bohemian Rhapsody at Live Aid.
Yeah.
Or James Hetfield, for that matter, performing any kind of music on a stage. So you have legends that are going to be remembered for decades or hundreds of years. And personally, I might be wrong. I might be biased because it's a matter of taste, but I don't see him there.
So diving it a little bit more into entrepreneurship, we know that you traveled. You say that you traveled to Silicon Valley and you lived there for a while, and you started like crashing offices to pitch Viberate. So now that the platform is up and running, what are the lessons that you have learned that have lasted with you as an entrepreneur, and what are the lessons that you have learned that you will say like, oh no, I wouldn't go that way?
So you have to know when to work, when to start with different activities. In terms of fundraising, if you only have an MVP, then you need to look for angel investors that share your passion or that they see something in you, not in your project. So usually early stage angel investors are not going to invest into your idea, they're going to invest in you. So as one of the investors in Silicon Valley told me, he said, I'd rather invest into a great team with a shitty project than into a great project with a shitty team, because a great team they're always going to know how to pivot, how to identify different opportunities, how to go away completely from the initial idea when they see that it's not leading anywhere and just pursue a completely different path. And there's a bigger chance that they're going to succeed. Whereas a crappy team with a great project, they're not even going to be able to execute their great idea because they're not a good team. And so, if you're pitching your idea, then this is the type of investors that you need to find and need to pursue and convince that you have a great team or that you're a great entrepreneur. And then as you start your company and you need additional funds, if you decide to raise a Series A, which is usually a pretty large investment, then you know when to do it. You have to know when to do it. So we were way too fast. You have to have revenue. No one's going to give you their money unless they believe in you like you're the god. Sometimes those things are going to happen, but they're not going to invest in you unless you have. In Silicon Valley, there's a rule of $100,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Once you have that, it's going to be quite easy to persuade them. If you have more than that, they're going to fight for you. They're going to send a private jet to pick you up and take you to the meeting. I know for a startup that got a lot of this, and then they sold the company for $1 billion, which made a lot of sense. So you have to learn a lot and make sure you don't rush it. So if you're going to rush it, there was a time in our history that we got completely focused on fundraising and didn't develop the product. So the product is it has to have focus, and because you're not going to raise any funds if the product is going to get outdated or it's not going to be good. But in Silicon Valley, another thing that I also learned is how good we have it here at home. The quality of life here in Slovenia is 10 times better than in the Bay Area. So we do have lower salaries than they have, but the entire quality of living, the cost of living, basically makes us richer than they are. So we 90% of Slovenians are their own homeowners. We don't rent, so we buy houses. It's cheaper to get capital. They're cheaper to buy. So we have the kindergartens here are much cheaper. They're really easy to afford. So if you have kids, the government's going to make sure that they're taken care of while you're at work. Women get 1 year off after they give birth, and it's paid by the government. So the government is going to cover their salary for 1 year. So this is all those social services are contributing to the quality of life that we have. So we have free universities. You don't have to pay $1 to go to university to study. And this is something that you're not getting in Silicon Valley. And it's a promised country, but you're not going to get this. And everybody's going to pitch your company to you, even though if you're not investors. So if you're waiting in a line on Starbucks, someone's going to start pitching you. And you say, I'm not an investor, I also have a startup. No. Just hear my pitch. So it's kind of a boring place to be. So we like to go out, to have fun, to party, to forget about business from time to time. But in Silicon Valley, it's all about business all the time. Just investors and entrepreneurs and this exit and that series A, B, C. Everybody's talking about that. And if you're a startup and if you have revenue and if you're a good fit for investors, then sure, yeah, move there, raise your round, make a big fat exit. But if you can avoid it, I would say avoid it. Just enjoy your life. We're a proof that you can have a successful company without Silicon Valley investors, and you can live a better life without it. This wasn't a good advertisement for Silicon Valley investors. So.
No, but we know that we are not selling the.
They're gonna admit it. if you're gonna, they're gonna admit it. That they're gonna agree with me sooner or later.
We are not selling the podcast unless they send us a private jet to pick us up, man. and we are moving to Slovenia for now on, man.
That's for sure. Vasja, I think you touched on a super important lessons for every entrepreneur that's listening here. That's many times investors invest more in you than in your idea, and that's something that's a super important lesson. Like, you can have a great idea, but if they don't trust you, as you said, they won't invest in you, and the other way around too. And I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what could be a good tip for all entrepreneurs hearing us out there to make investors trust more in you on one hand, and also to make them trust in your idea, because it is important too, I guess, in a way.
So I would say that the biggest driver is passion, which is a pretty subjective thing. So whether you have it or not, or whether they recognize it or not. So you can influence it to a certain extent, but not fully. What you can do is you have to have your skin in the game. They like that. So if you're going to show that in our case, we used to have really good, comfortable careers. We're making enough money to have a good living. And then in our 40s, we're quite old to start a startup, but we said, okay, let's leave everything behind and let's go all into the startup. And this makes them really confident with you, because they know that you were the first one to risk everything and you invested into yourself first. And then they're going to be more comfortable about giving you their money. But if you have a day job and a startup is your part job, and say, okay, yeah, well, I still need security, I have to provide for my family, which is a natural thing to have, they're not going to be as confident. So they're going to say, okay, I'm investing my money into you, but you're not going to fully focus, because apparently you don't believe in your idea as much as you say you do. Well, in our case, it's a funny thing that our biggest angel investor is as far away from music as possible. So he is one of the smartest nuclear physicists in the world. So his company produces the best controllers for nuclear particle accelerators, and they're actually building. They have a huge role in the biggest experiment in human history. So they're building a nuclear fusion reactor in France, which is going to be finished by the time they're all going to be dead, because it takes so much time. But it's expected to solve most of the world's energetic needs by fusing atoms together and producing energy like that. So they're he's a completely different industry. He doesn't know anything about music, but he was the one who actually said, I invested in you guys because I believe that you're going to fail a lot of times, but you're going to be able to pick yourself up again and continue where you left, and you're not going to give up. And he was the one that actually bailed us out when we came from Silicon Valley, when we were 3 weeks away from going completely bankrupt. I remember there was a meeting a couple of days before Christmas. We were all bummed because we didn't make it. And we called him for a meeting and sat him in the conference room and said, so yeah, we have bad news. We didn't make it. We didn't get an investment in Valley. We only have 3 weeks worth of money. We're just going to spend it to go for a trip with a team and then fire everyone and start looking for a new job. And he said, how much money do you need to carry on? And we just set a number that we thought would be enough. And he simply said, okay. And that was it. He signed a contract, he wired the money, and I think that he made the right decision, because now, back then, we were a small startup. Now we have a company with 45 people and a huge platform. And he saw that in us. And one of the meetings, not so long time ago, he said, yeah, I was the only one, back then I was the only one who believed in you when you even didn't believe in yourself. And you want investors like that in your company.
That's an amazing story and the best way to exemplify what we're talking about, like, for sure.
That's a really cool story, Vasja. Talking about entrepreneurship, I know it goes hand by hand with innovation, and most of the people who look to innovate, they want to bring value to their clients. They want to bring something different out of the game. We know that there's not a single recipe or a successful secret formula to be innovative and bring value, but according to your experience, what could be a good advice to make sure that you always bring value to your clients, but at the same time always keep innovating as an entrepreneur?
So you have to realize that in most cases, your first try is not going to bring any value. So the Viberate that you're seeing now is actually our third take into music analytics. So we had 2 prior versions that we invested a lot of money and effort and work into, and then we decided just to delete them because they weren't good enough. So you have to learn from your mistakes. Sometimes you're not going to bring any value, even though you think you're bringing it, but you didn't do your homework. So you didn't ask your potential customers what they need, what were their needs. In our case, it was much easier for us because we used to be who our clients are today. So we were, as I said, solving our own problems. But it still wasn't enough for us to nail it the first time. So we had to ask a lot of questions. We sent out a lot of surveys to different people to tell us what they need, what they use in their everyday life. And the most important lesson that I learned was from one of the books that I read that was all about testing the ideas. And the lesson was that everybody's going to lie to you. So everybody, when you're going to ask people, would you be willing to buy my product or my service? Most of them are going to say, yeah, sure, I'm willing to buy it. Once you launch it, they're not going to return emails or calls because they're not going to buy it. So the only way to really validate this is to, okay, why don't you buy it up front? I'm going to give you a 50% discount, pay up front, wait for a year, and when we launch, you're going to be the first one to have it. And then 95% of them are going to say, yeah, well, call me some other day. So that's the most important lesson, because it will give you false hope. So everybody's going to say, yeah, I'm going to buy. I really like the idea. I'll wait for you to finish it, and then I'm going to be your customer. And then you invest, you take a mortgage on your house, you invest everything you have in your idea, and then they're not going to buy it. So you're going to lose everything. And this is especially a case it's a cultural thing, I noticed. So, and where I come from, people are going to be quite straightforward to you. If they think that your idea is shit, they're going to say it's shit. Even if they think it's not so crappy, they're still going to say it is. It's an ego thing. But if you go to the US, it's the other way around. So everybody's going to say, yeah, that's interesting. I really like it, because they tend to encourage each other this way. But it could be toxic, so it can give you false hope, especially if you come from where we come from. It's going to give you some confidence that it shouldn't be there. And I know for a couple of startups that went to with us, Silicon Valley from Slovenia, and they were all super excited for the first couple of weeks. They said everybody likes our idea, everybody said it's interesting, and then a couple of weeks after, they started saying, yeah, well, no one's picking up their phone and no one's returning our emails. So when I was pitching investors, that I sometimes finished up with a joke. I said, so how big our chances are for you to invest in us between this is interesting and here's a check? So if this is interesting being your shit and here's a check, okay, here's a check. So they were all laughing, and yeah, we said that there are cultural differences between us.
100%. And you know, those cultural differences, we noticed that as soon as we met, like us, the podcast guys, when we met, the cultural difference, even though we are speaking the same language, sometimes it's like, what are you saying, dude? Like, we cannot understand sometimes each other when we are literally speaking the same language, and everything is related with culture. Now that we want to get a little bit more geek, and we want to go into NFTs, but before getting into that, we want that all our audience understand a little bit what NFTs are. So if you were to explain what an NFT is, how would you explain it?
So picture yourself going to Paris and to the Louvre Museum and buy Mona Lisa from them. They're not going to sell it, but just for the sake of the argument, you bring together $5 billion and say, I'm buying Mona Lisa. So they're going to take the picture off the wall, and along with the picture, they're going to give you this little certificate. It's going to be stamped and signed by them saying, this is the original Mona Lisa. And now let's go to the digital world. So you buy a digital artwork, and then you're going to get an NFT saying that this is the one original artwork. So it's an equivalent of a certificate of authenticity. So you can photocopy the Mona Lisa, you can put it on your wall, it's going to be worthless without a certificate. And the same thing goes for digital artwork. So if you're not going to have an NFT from the author saying this is my version of the artwork, you can copy it, but it's not going to be worth anything. It's going to look the same, but it's going to be worthless. So NFTs are non-fungible tokens. Those are unique tokens that carry a unique piece of information or content.
And Vasja, also for our audience to understand, you also talked about the crypto that Viberate has, and you use it to actually pay. Could you explain it a little bit more on how it actually works? Like, how does crypto fit into Viberate?
So instead of mining, you could earn our tokens by helping us build the database. If you were entering content into Viberate, in the end of the day, you got a certain amount of tokens in your account as a return. So we basically printed our own money to build our own database. That was the main role of the token. And then now we're integrating payments gateway into Viberate that's going to allow you to first earn the token and then spend it to buy Viberate services. And that same service also allows you to spend VIP tokens on a number of retail stores. You can even go grocery shopping with our own token. So it's a really liquid one. And then the idea was to allow people to use our token. If they're going to pay with our token, they're going to get a special discount. So if you later on we're going to introduce artist booking, we're going to take a commission. So if you're paying with dollars or euros or even Bitcoin, you're going to pay, let's say, 5% commission. But if you're going to use our token, you're only going to pay half of that. That was the incentive. I think that we still found a nice role for the token and people really embraced it, which was not the case with a lot of different projects that did ICOs back in 2017. It was just one huge mess, and the bubble popped because of projects that didn't deliver on what they promised. Well, you never deliver everything that you say in a white paper because you're going to pivot. as you go. You're going to see that, well, maybe this idea wasn't as good as it sounded when we wrote it, but let's make something different with it. And that was also one of the reasons why we recently dropped a gig NFT. So in our white paper, we were describing that we're going to create a blockchain-based marketplace where musicians can be booked. And this is exactly the idea, but just done in a slightly different way. So instead of allowing artists to charge for the gigs in crypto, we said, let's create an NFT that people are going to be able to buy. And that NFT, called a gig NFT, is going to hold the rights to this artist's live performance, which is something that we tried with Umek, and we sold it successfully. And now people ask us, so why do you need the NFT for? You can just simply send some Bitcoin to an artist and they're going to play at your birthday party. That's a good question, but the NFT here makes the artist's performance a tradable commodity. Much like you trade oil, you can now trade with tokens that hold rights to artist performance. So let's say I bought 3 gig NFTs for Umek, so I have the right for his 3 performances, but you have 1 token for Metallica to play a couple of tracks at your birthday party. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to trade my 3 tokens of Umek for 1 of Metallica's. So are we going to trade? Or you can say, I'm going to pay you 10 Ether for 1 Umek's gig. I'm going to sell it to you, and now you hold that right. So you can trade it with it as long as you want, or you can then decide to cash in and say, okay, I'm getting married. I want him to play at my wedding. You're already paid because I have your token. Come here, we're going to burn a token. You're going to get the ether that's locked into the token, and that's it. So the idea was, now when events are still banned in most of the world, you can buy a bunch of gigs from artists that you think are going to charge much more when the events are back. So you can buy 5 gigs of a certain DJ that's struggling right now. So you're going to help them with, you're going to show them support. But in 2 years, you can maybe sell those gigs to Coachella. And you're going to make 3x on your investment. That was the idea, and that still is the idea. So, but we're still testing it. We're still quite early with it.
That's amazing, Vasja. And now that you were mentioning artists, I know that you can make a different type of NFTs, for example, one of a kind or limited collection of 10 or 100. What would be the best scenario for, well, it's subjective, of course, but for an artist to do a one of a kind NFT or like a collection? Where's the value in that?
Well, it depends. The more editions that you make, the less they're worth. So the most famous case of artists selling an NFT holding a digital artwork was the one with Beeple, where he sold his artwork for $60 million through Christie's or Sotheby's, one of the auction houses, and it was one of a kind. So if he would make 10 NFTs, like 10 certificates, so 10 editions of that artwork, it would be worth as much. So it depends on what you're selling and how big of an artist you are. There's not a general rule on how to do it.
Yeah, and I feel that the music industry, for example, is really well known that the music industry just jumps into like a new trend or what's the new cool thing to do, and the NFTs just happen to be there at this time. So, but I feel that at some point everybody just started to launch their NFTs without like knowing exactly how to do it or what they were launching as an NFT. And they were basically missing the basics, which is like having a network, having a platform, having a fan base for the NFT. So you already did like the very first live gig NFT with Umek. So for you that you already had built all this stuff in order for you to launch it, what was the main challenge when launching it?
So yeah, it was the feeling was the same as with the 2017 ICO bubble. So at first, there were a couple of really high-profile cases. People just made insane amount of money, and then now everyone wanted on that train. And this always leads to the bubble bursting, which is something that I think already happened with NFTs, because everybody was releasing them, so they weren't as exclusive as before. There was a huge inflation. And this is why we said, okay, let's try to do it a bit differently, because like you said, a lot of people they just wanted to release an NFT without knowing what exactly to connect it with. And we said, so for artists, everyone knows how to do a gig, performing artists. So this is something they're familiar with. Why don't we package this as an NFT and send this and sell this right to the artist performance as NFT? Because everyone knows how to use that. That's one of the reasons that drove us to not just copying whatever everyone else was doing.
And also, Vasja, you just mentioned that you want Viberate to become like this long-term complete marketplace for music industry with blockchain and technology and NFTs incorporated into it in order to sell live gigs as a tradable commodity. So now that this first sale of NFTs already happened with Umek, how likely do you see this initial idea working out in the future, and what changes in the music industry need to happen to go forward?
So the next step is the relaunch of the nft.viberate.com website, where we're going to start, I think this is going live this week. We're going to start collecting interest from everyone. So if you're an artist, if you're in our database, you can go to nft.viberate.com. You can search yourself in the database and say, okay, click on your name and say, okay, I'm interested in releasing a live gig NFT with Viberate. And then we're going to wait for a couple of weeks or even months to see how this interest, whether there's a lot of interest for people to do so. And then we're going to select those artists that we think are appropriate for a next drop. And we're going to do another limited drop. So this time it's not going to be only with Umek, it's going to be with a bunch of artists that we find interesting for that kind of stunt. And then so this is going to be the second test. So if this goes well, if they're going to sell their tokens, then we're going to integrate this into Viberate as one of the features.
Yeah, for us to close the question, if we were in a movie about your life, what would the post-credit scene be? What are the new projects that are coming in the sequel for Vasja Veber in the music industry?
Yeah, I wish I knew that. I don't know. Well, if you would ask me this question 15 years ago in my 20s, you would probably get a very different answer. But now I see a lot of changes, especially in our small group of founders. As we're getting older and married and with kids, our lives aren't as interesting as they used to be. So they aren't as high octane that they used to be. But we're still, I wouldn't change it for the world. So I think that everything's gonna just go maybe slightly toned down. As the older that we get, the more we cherish our own free time, and we don't work as much as we used to. We still work a lot, much more than the average person. But so I would say that the sequel wouldn't be as interesting as the current version.
Awesome. Thank you, Vasja. Please, how can our listeners, how can they reach out? How can they look into Viberate?
So I'm the only one with that name on LinkedIn. It's really easy to find me. So they can reach out through LinkedIn, or they can go to viberate.com and there's a contact form. They can fill it out and I'm gonna get it.
Awesome. Okay, guys. So you heard it. It's Viberate. 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 I had to spell it out in Spanish.
Yeah.
My Spanish sucks. I wanted to learn it, but I gave up after 3 months. One thing is that you have to learn languages when you're really young in order to stick. So my daughter is 3 years old and she speaks better Spanish than I do because they speak it in her kindergarten. And so that was one of the reasons. And the second one is that I used to learn Italian, and they sound so similar that I was mixing up words and I just gave up.
They are. That's why sometimes learning either Italian or Portuguese for us is kind of easier, or sometimes just understanding it is a little bit easier for us because they are very similar.
But even we, the four of us that speak the same language, have trouble sometimes understanding between us, because like it's such a like depending on slangs and on accents. So I guess
it's not the same language. I go often to Ibiza. Back in the days, I was trying there for business. Now I just go there for vacation. My wife and I love the island. It's the best island in the world. So they speak Catalan there, and they have street signs both in Spanish, so in Castellan and Catalan, and it's a different language. It's not the same. It's not even similar.
For us, it's a familiar story.
Awesome, Vasja. Thank you very much. From 8,000 kilometers, thank you. I hope you had a great time, and I hope we see you soon.
Yes, in South America with Umek.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna come there sooner or later.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.